Welcome to FinTech for the Common Good, Aging and Innovation Session. I am Yumiko Murakami. I am the head of OECD Tokyo Center. Very pleased to be the moderator for this exciting panel discussion. As you know, Japan is the cutting-edge country in many fields, but in particular, aging society. This is a global phenomenon. We are aging. Demographic tsunami is coming. It's already here in Japan, but in fact, it's going to come to your country, a lot of countries in the world. So today, we will discuss in this panel what technologies can do, what digital technologies can do, especially in the context of financial, actually financial institutions, financial sort of environment. Considering the fact that we are all aging very fast. And we will discuss this in actually very international way. So we obviously have panelists from Japan who can share their experiences and perspectives from this aging country, but also we have a speaker from the United States as well. So let me briefly introduce our exciting panelists today. We have Narasaki-san. He is the CDO Sompo Japan. And we also have Taki-san from Money Forward. These are the two Japanese panelists today. But we also have Mike Hodin. You can see him on the screen. He is calling in from New York. So it's a very international discussion that we're going to have today. But let me just start off with the Narasaki-san with a little introduction in terms of what you are doing with your company, but it's also what you see from a vintage point in terms of the opportunities which may be arising as a result of the aging society and as a result of these exciting technologies that are emerging. Go ahead.
Thank you, Murakami-san. Hello, everyone. I'm Koichi Narasaki. I'm the Chief Digital Officer for Sompo Holdings, which is basically insurance global conglomerate. So, but 4.5 years ago, I was running startups, actually 5 startups in Silicon Valley for 16 years before I came back to Tokyo, where is my hometown, and took this job. So let me tell you in a snapshot what the Sompo is. Sompo is, as I said, insurance company, but we are growing out of insurance industry. So what we're going to be doing, we are building so-called a theme park for security, health, and well-being for the society. That is creating a value for this society, which is aligned with SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and also. So this is a theme park kind of illustration. So we're actually proactively helping people to get them safer, better well-being, and also healthier. And that includes our nursing care business. We are Japan's one of the largest nursing care industry, service provider, care provider, and we have roughly 80,000 recipients of our service. So for them, also included, we are carrying all the digital goodies to complement our services, and that's a part of my job. And I'm honored to be here.
Thank you. Taki-san, a few words from you, please, if you can just give that.
Okay, so hi, I'm Toshio. I'm one of the co-founders of a company called Money Forward. So could you put up the slides, if possible? Yeah, so today I brought a material called Financial Care, Leveraging Financial Data. So just to give you a very brief introduction, I'm sorry I skipped my own self-introduction today, but so Money Forward is an 8-year-old company. We built the company to make money a neutral way of thinking. I mean, in Japan, people think about finance and money as something of a grim, dark theme covered with uncertainty and bad things, but we always mention that our mission is to turn money into a more of a neutral way of thinking. And in that regard, we want to make financial advice available for everyone. We want to make finance much more of a constructive tool rather than some way that governs your life. So we want to free up that kind of a way of thinking about financials. And what we do in practice is we have a whole lot of service, but I just want to touch on one, which is called Money Forward Me, which in technological terms, we call it the PFM app, the Personal Finance Management app. Very much like Mint.com in the US. There's so many familiar names around the world in the world of FinTech, but we started this business at the time of the foundation of our company. And right now we have 11 million users in Japan. We are the account aggregator of virtually most of the banks, credit cards, electronic monies, security brokerage, and all sorts of financial accounts. So in Japan, in average, 3.5 accounts belong to one person. And so at the end of the day, you just don't get the entirety of what your money is all about. And our first point of value creation is that, where we simply aggregate people's financial accounts so that they can have a snapshot, or they can have one single picture of what's going on with their money throughout, let's say, November. And that is actually pretty important. I mean, many people in Japan do not actually recognize how much they actually spent last month. I mean, this becomes much more complicated when we start using credit cards, because we get charged on the next month or the next month. And so we try to build a free financial statement for everyone so that initially they can get grip about what's going on with their money. Now, on the scope about the aging population, we want to bring two things. And one is about controlling your expenses. So this isn't a service we haven't done yet, but there's a lot of functions in the world where you can actually stop your electronic money expense from online applications. And there are many tools provided by, let's say, Visa and MasterCard, and these kind of control mechanisms can allow you to actually, let's say, give a credit card to your 90-year-old grandma and still feel okay. Or you can give a prepaid debit card to an 80-year-old and still feel okay, because the expense is controlled before everything. And you can control where it can be used, you can control when it could be used, and what kind of purpose it could be used, or you can create a maximum amount of how much you can use. So those expenses are one of the point of concerns, especially in the world where we're becoming increasingly cashless. And the other point of view is something I have been experimenting for the past 3 years, and that is about how you can care your elderly through families and caretakers. So as I mentioned, Money Forward provides a personal finance app that controls your own money for 11 million users. We have tons of information, tons of data that can give you, let's say, alerts, whether maybe you have been under attack by some kind of a cybersecurity crime, or you have just overspent something that you shouldn't have been doing. And this becomes an intensely fierce problem when you get elderly, and especially when you get slight dementia into a more deeper level of dementia. I mean, in the level of dementia-ated situations, things get messy. And well, this is one of my personal experience, but my grandma suffered a very heavy dementia in the very late of her ages. And I mean, family communication in those kind of situations just turns horrible. But many of the things actually comes from the sense that you don't know what's going on with your own money, or you don't know what your grandma had done 10 hours ago. But something good about digital is that you can get track about any kind of activities once that activity is linked to online activities. So I wanted to start off by starting that with digital data in the financial world. That means, Japan is still a cash-dominated world. So even your oldest grandmas and granddads goes to the ATMs, draw out like $1,000 of cash, and still holds that for his or her daily expenses. But if you can track, let's say your grandma always extracts $1,000 every month, but this month she's drawn out $3,000. That's a lot of money. But you can track that data once you link those accounts to, let's say, API connected personal finance app. And sharing those data to the families, or sharing the right amount of data, let's say just emails, that will create a lot of room for financial security and okayness of being with the elderly population. So that's about it for now.
Thank you so much. Now let's turn it over to Mike. Can you hear us? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'm delighted to be here and be part of this panel. So for opening up, let me just say that I'm very proud to be the CEO of the Global Coalition on Aging. We are a group of about 20 to 25 global companies operating cross-sector and cross-discipline. So for example, Intel and Philips, Pfizer, Novartis, Bayer, Home Instead, which is an elder home care company, Bank of America, Aegon, the global health insurance company. And what we all have in common is the understanding that there's this, as Yumiko, you opened up, megatrend of global aging. By the next couple decades, there will be 2 billion of us on the planet over 60. And the way we think about that is that this is not only an opportunity for a healthier and more active aging, but it's a huge marketplace. There's this $17 trillion silver economy. And as the older population becomes an even greater proportion of an overall population, in order to have economic growth and fiscal sustainability anywhere, we need to have a very robust silver economy. So that's an opportunity across whatever sector you're thinking about, and of course, including in FinTech. And I know we'll get a chance to talk about it, but let me just give you a couple very quick examples where, number one, often whatever you thought about an older person with respect to technology is likely not very true. The increasing use of technology by people over 60, over 70, even into their 80s and perhaps 90s is much more extensive than the received wisdom suggests. It's also the case that we have technology and digital transformation being very important in the health space. And I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk a little bit about this. But you have areas even that we don't think about as much. We know about Alzheimer's. You just referred to it. Of course, it's a huge problem. We know about cardiovascular and diabetes. But you know, as we grow older, we also have vision loss, or at least vision deterioration. And the data are stunning. 1.1 billion of us on the planet have vision loss. And 90% of that is avoidable, 90%. So how can we use technology as a predict and a prevent support structure for vision loss, particularly as we age? A second example is osteoporosis and fracture risk. And I'll be able to talk about some of the technologies there, where we're beginning to understand more and more how to predict through the use of AI, fracture risk, which then can be a very important tool to avoid really bad things from happening, even as we have osteoporosis as we age, but to treat it and rehabilitate it. So there are huge opportunities here. It's in the health sector. It's in financial services, as already was referred to, but it's also in our daily life. And we know from COVID, particularly around the world, and I'm based here in New York, although we operate globally, I can tell you, whether you are 30 years old or 75 years old, the amount of increased use of telehealth and telemedicine has been stunning. The amount of digital payments have been huge, and the amount of streaming that's going on at all ages for fun and enjoyment at home has been really extensive. So I'm really delighted to be part of this, and I hope we can have a great discussion. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Mike. So I would actually like to really talk about very concrete situations where digital transformation is actually taking place. So, if you don't mind, I would like you to talk about the actual, maybe business situations, product development, service development, where digital technology is already making a big difference, from your business perspective, but as also from a society perspective. I'm sure there are tons of them, but if you can just pick a few where you see the most interesting upside in terms of where they might lead us to, that would be really interesting starting point for the discussion. So maybe, Narasaki-san, would you mind starting off with that question?
Yes, okay, definitely. Thank you. So yes, digital transformation is here to stay in this industry, insurance industry, as well as other segments of the industries. But let me just pick up a couple points. One, so we all used to have insurance contracts, underwritten in the paperwork, by way of paperwork or brokers and the phone calls and all that. Now, more and more people, way more people, are just doing digital, so-called for our viewpoint, digital underwriting, which means you never see any agent, any broker. You basically do all online. So web direct, people can say, and not only just contracting the insurance, your claims processing. If you have auto insurance and you have been involved in accident, probably 2 decades ago, lots of people, so-called adjusters, dash to the site and they just check your vehicle and they estimate how much the damage, the repair cost will be. Now it's all getting digitalized. Mm-hmm. So basically, insurance industry is the biggest changing, transforming itself in the biggest way by way of digital, especially because of this COVID. Mm-hmm. We have our call centers, but call centers are so, in a way, submitted or very nasty or COVID, a kind of prone situation because people just flock together, take a call. Mm-hmm. Now we are just making a home-based or remote-based calling centers. So if you call up at the time of accident, he or she may not be in the call center to take your call. They're just relaxed at their homes and still taking care of you. So that's, I can make so many different examples, but so insurance industry is digitalized.
That's good. Right? No more papers, no more Hanko stamping and, literally like signing 50, right. Papers, which I think is obviously good news. But, I would just say, is this going to be kind of more difficult for older people? If people are not, if digital skills are not as high as, some of the younger generation, Would that be a problem potentially? How would you deal with that?
As a matter of fact, you're right. They are like feeling they are just isolated. I mean, elderly people or senior people, and they still want their agents, their brokers to come to their homes, even that under this kind of COVID situation. So we of course advise not to, but because they stick to it, they have to do this. We have to do this. So that's as you said, kind of digital divide happening over there.
And what do you think we need to do in terms of making sure that this digital divide does not, cause more problems going forward?
We are not idle or dormant on this. So we are trying to tackle this problem a couple ways. One, probably most effective is, Japan, we have a line, which is like a Japanese version of WhatsApp. Everybody, even the seniors, my mom, she's almost 90, but she still uses Line. So Line could be one good example. That's why we started our all insurance processes through Line. So instead of calling somebody or getting a calls, we just communicate with our policyholders in terms of Line, through Line.
Right.
So even they have some kind of accent that they have to claim some accent, they still can use the Line. This is relatively popular amongst the seniors, very seniors. So that's one of the solutions we have.
Actually, I'd like to ask Mike on this question, because I think you might see different things in the United States versus us. In Japan, we're actually going through this massive transformation, digital transformation in many different sectors, including the insurance sector, and we're trying to get rid of papers, which I think is really good in general, but this question of digital divide, especially when it comes to aging population. And as Narasaki-san said, there are things that the companies are doing to make sure that they are reaching out to these older people who may not have the same level in terms of digital skills versus the younger generation. And from Mike, from your perspective, what are the things that you are seeing, maybe with U.S. companies who are probably digitizing their operations as quickly as possible to make their operations more efficient. Yet they need to make sure that they're not leaving these people who may not have the same level of digital skills. What are the things that you're noticing on that front to address that challenge?
Yeah, so I would think of it perhaps a little differently. The first point is to analyze what we mean by an older population much more diligently. So if we're saying an older population is 55 or 60 plus, or even 65 plus, the digital intelligence of a 65-year-old or a 75-year-old or even an 80-year-old is much more aggressive, shall we say, than maybe a 90-year-old. So, today's 70 or 75-year-old might have left the workforce 10 years ago, but they were in a workforce where they were already being exposed to technology. And so the first point is to make a clear distinction among the 2 billion of us over 60 on the planet, and those between 60 and 70 might be very different than those 90 plus. Those who are very active and healthy might be different than those with dementia. And analyzing that marketplace the way we would analyze any marketplace is very important for companies that are looking at it. Secondly, and this is happening more and more, is to ensure that the design of the technology is not just done for people, but with people. And of course, so again, if we think that there's a marketplace here, in America, as you may know, roughly 70% of all disposable income is held by people 60 and over, 70%. So no matter what the product or service is that you're designing, it would be advantageous to design that with at least some degree of an older population in mind. And then, of course, the third point is thinking about technology and digitalization, not only from the standpoint of using it, but from the standpoint of its facility as an enabler. And of course, that's very true in the health space. And I've already referred, for example, Amgen just entered a deal with a small company, Crystal Bone Algorithm, which may help identify osteoporosis fracture risk. I mean, this is huge. Now, this is not something that an 82-year-old is going to have to use, but it is something where digital health is going to help, in this case, through AI, in identifying fracture risk. Another example, which we probably all know, is increasingly we work with Philips, for example, and the use of their technology in the hospital. If a doctor is doing their rounds and they're seeing, 18, 20, 23 patients that morning, the use of AI and digital technology will be able to tell that doctor that, patient number 14, who he would normally not see for 90 minutes, is at risk of having a fall or some cardiovascular event, and you better go right to her bedroom. And so that's happening more and more. So that's enabling a healthier aging, and it may be different from actually using it per se, but it's for an older population. So we think of it as for an older population, and we think of it as usability by an older population.
Interesting, thank you. On that point, in terms of how these digital technologies are used for and with an older population, I want to go back to your point, Taki-san, earlier. You said some of the businesses that your company has been conducting. One of the examples that you gave us was to really give easy usage of financial planning, right? By having these apps, to say, okay, you're spending too much, or you're allowed to spend up to this point. But in some way, you can say some of these functions have been around for a long time. Credit card company would tell you, oh, your limit is whatever, right? But I'm sure the digital technology that you're using is actually making it a lot easier and probably a lot more efficient. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how the digital aspect of that whole transformation is making a difference, and how that is helping especially older population.
Sure. So the theme I always mention, there are two themes. Like, one is about so when technology kind of advances, you tend to get to the state where you feel more sense of safety around, let's say, your data or how you can use the service. Like, a very good example is it might sound miraculous, but in Japan, more than 98% of the banks now have APIs. I mean, that's a huge thing compared to many other countries. And so now we live in a world where anyone can securely connect their app to bank accounts and have it monitored every single day. I mean, that's a huge thing. And that wasn't possible 2 years ago before the Japanese regulators kind of made their mind to go on with this agenda. And the other thing is about the easiness of using. And it's a very huge theme because Money Forward, of course, started off as a tech company. So 11 million users inside our ecosystem. Most of them are 20 to 40-year-olds or even people in their 50s. So people relatively in the working ages. And we weren't the company that targeted the elderly population. But what we've been increasingly realizing is that we might just as well forget about smartphones. I mean, we can actually deliver service without using a smartphone, let's say emails, or maybe push actually needs a smartphone, but it doesn't need an app for that. I mean, but we can actually decrease the amount of information that is delivered to the, let's say, the app to the working population, and decrease that to the only portion where anyone can actually understand, not just the elderly, but let's say the 5-year-olds or 7-year-olds. I mean, these apps always want to deliver whole tons of information, but actually decreasing the number of information is a huge like accomplishment. And that's what we experimented in Kyoto, where we partnered with one credit union so that they can deliver their grandma's bank accounts movements to their grandson. I mean, both of them are, let's say, elderly or very young, but that still works. And that becomes possible because we actually, at the end of the day, we need to become technologically neutral. That means we don't have to use apps, or we don't have to use, say, cloud-based infrastructure or blockchain or whatever. I mean, we need to be neutral to the technology, and we need to be very straightforward to the purpose of why you use the technology. And the purpose in this case is about creating enough but small amount of information that could be understood by any kind of the population. So like push notification and emails are sometimes very much enough, and that is universal, like that could be understood by any kind of population.
Right.
So I mean, the sense of creating safety and that easiness of understanding is the only thing that we always mention about this kind of service.
I think a lot of these, the issues and challenges and opportunities are very much global, and especially, when Mike, you talked about the usage of, in a way, big data, right? I think because of the data that's available, AI is now, enabler, you said, is making it easier for example, medical, personnel to react more quickly, more efficiently to certain situations, and things like that are definitely happening in different parts of the world, different parts of the society. But I think when we talk about these opportunities, I think it's important to think about potentially shared platforms. To borrow your words, Mike, platforms for and with Asian community. So for perhaps the data that's available, that has been made available because of all these technologies that have been implemented in different segments of the economy, society in Japan and the US, with Asian society, platform for and with Asian community, maybe there should be platform to connect users who are in certain age groups. So my question to actually all of you, but I would like to start with Mike. Are there platforms that are actually available, which can be, I guess, described as for Asian community? And what I have in mind is more like maybe data sharing, for example, technology sharing in order for new businesses, new services, new products to be emerging from the best practice sharing platform. Mike, do you see any of those initiatives?
Well, so in both America and a large part of Western Europe, you tell me if it's true in Japan or parts of Asia as well, but some of the most successful entrepreneurs are older entrepreneurs. And therefore, the sharing of data in order to be successful in that space is quite extensive, and it's growing all the time. Secondly, and we've talked from Sompo's point of view, you talked about elder caregiving. There's a growing interest, for example, in technology that is designed explicitly for use in an elder caregiver setting. Now, again, it might be the elder caregiver, it might be the actual person who's being taken care of, or the adult daughter or son. Usually it's the adult daughter, but either way. And so, for example, we know there's a small company and they developed something called GrandPad, and it's basically an iPad, which is a lot more nimble. It's a little bit easier to use and a little bit easier to learn from if you're older and you didn't have the experience. But the other part that we observe is the increasing use of voice technology, which is, I'm not sure if you would exactly call that a platform, but the use of voice technology is growing. The applications are very significant. And what it's leading to is an ability, no matter what age you are, to be able to use technology in a way that maybe it's a little bit harder because you didn't grow up with your thumbs or fingers. So voice technology is very, very exciting. There's a really interesting, innovative company out of Israel called VoiceIt, which is adopting that technology. We met them at the very beginning of COVID, and we know that they've even helped out in the COVID environment. So that's how I would suggest to answer this. We think there's great opportunity. And again, I would just come back to the point that the marketplace is so large, particularly as we have not only the number of older people, but more old than young because of super aging that is taking place everywhere. It is well worth it for any entrepreneur or any company that is looking at developing systems to think about design with and for, let's call it a silver economy. And that's going to have a lot of very good capital returns.
Right. Okay, capital returns. For investors, if you're listening, good returns for financial investments. Now, just wanted to quickly ask Narasaki-san, talking about these opportunities, obviously very exciting things are happening as a result of digital technology and transformation, but there are people who are not going to be participating in this exciting development of new technologies. Some people, we said earlier, may not be as skilled as others. And we want to make sure these people are not left behind. What are the things, as a company, are you thinking about or have you been doing to make sure no one is left behind?
Right. So no senior one is left behind in this age of digital divide and kind of COVID divide situation. That's very important. So what we do in a nutshell, what we are doing is we are just actually making our digital caregiving processes all digitalized. But we have left one thing, which is most critical thing, which is the care itself. It has to be with your hands, caregiver's hands, and manual, analog, human stuff. And other things are all digitalized. So that means including even some of the financial probably transactions that that particular senior has to do can be done through caregivers or by the help of caregivers. So just like Mike said, I think this is more like a collaboration over there at the place of where our caregiving is happening. So these are the things we are actually deploying throughout our nursing care homes, and our visiting caregivers are taking care of them.
I think that's related to what Taki-san said about how your technology is making it easier for family members to help older members of the same families in terms of keeping the financial independence, right? But at the same time, does that cause potentially a challenge in terms of privacy because this data issue, right? Because we're talking about family members potentially having control over the financial independence of older members. I think this is an exciting opportunity, but at the same time, there is this issue of privacy and how, and I said earlier, the platform, what kind of platform would be appropriate to make sure that there's a protection, but also there's a usage of very valuable data. Do you have any sense at all in terms of what's happening on that front?
I think one point is like, are we doing well in the analog world before the digitalized agenda? And so there are many cases in Japan where, let's say, you have a 90-year-old grandmother who have a subsequent amount of bank cash.
A lot of cash, right?
And her, sons or daughters, maybe in the 60s, are caretaking her. And in many cases, this son or daughter will need to borrow her cash card with the 4-number PIN and go to the ATMs, pull out the money, and come back. Now, in the digitalized world, that is like a scam. That is like a crime. But in many of the analog or physical world, we actually create impromptu principal agency situation where we trust one another, give our passwords, and actually let them do it. And that kind of regime change, I believe, is still not well imagined in the digitalized world. I mean, that's why actually I impose heavily about the world of financial APIs, because API is not about data connection. API is about authorizing one another through high-level authentication. So when you can authorize digitally, then there will be data that can actually, be monitored afterwards. Right. And that's a very, secure thing to have in your life. So I think this one answer to that will be financial APIs for everyone. That could be beneficial for both the self and also for sons and daughters caretakers.
Okay. Well, we actually are running out of time, but I would like to ask you to say a few words, literally 30 seconds, to conclude discussion in terms of where you put your money. If you were an investor in this digital world, FinTech, aging, you combine all these elements, what would you do with your own investment? Mike, I'm going to put you in the spot. 30 seconds.
Anyone who is focused on using health technology for prevention of wellness at home. I think that's the future.
Okay, that's the future. That's where your money is going to go. Right, okay.
Well, that's...
I'm going to write it down. I'll talk to you in a few years' time and see if you've been right.
Technology that's already used at home around safety or entertainment or even climate control. We have Nest is a brand in America. I don't know if it's elsewhere.
Thank you.
Why not wellness?
Sorry, I have to wrap up with the Narasaki-san's your money. Where is it going?
It's digital therapy. Yeah,
oh,
just like
digital
Mike
therapy.
said. Yes, and digital therapy will be even more inclusive, including seniors, including even poorer people. So I think it's there to stay, here to stay. So definitely digital therapy.
Okay, Taki-san, where would you put your money into? Other than buying your own company shares, but
yeah, it's already public. So, well, I would say to Narasaki-san, a new kind of insurance is where I think money should be going to. I mean, insurance covers not just the contracts, but it covers your life in many cases, and it can cover unprecedented risk sometimes. So, I mean, that kind of wholeness of safety is something that people always pay money for. I mean, many of the other things can become free, but sense of safety is always premium.
Sense of safety. All right, we are totally out of time, but I think we gave you very good investment tips as well as some of the very interesting, macro trends in the aging and digital world. So hopefully you enjoyed our discussion. And have a good day. And Mike, thank you so much for coming in from New York. Thank you.
Thank you. Great to see everyone.